Morning. Welcome. Appreciate everybody coming today. We do have some special guests here today. We have some students from the Souderton Charter School from Montgomery County. They're up here on a field trip and doing some advocacy work. So I'm glad they could join us today as we discuss cyber and charter school funding moving forward. We have a good number of individuals who are looking obviously for some equity, fairness in what we do in education funding moving forward. Amy Ruck-Kagan, Executive Director of the Philadelphia Charters for Excellence. Bob Fafich, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Coalition for Public Charter Schools. Rachel Amakuler, Deputy Director of Policy for PennCan. Ron Sofo, CEO Principal of City Charter High School. Amy Hollister, CEO of Northwood Academy Charter School. Kate Tilo, did I get that right? Datillo, Chief Operations Officer for Environmental Charter School. Thank you. I'm State Representative Seth Grove. When we discuss education funding, it comes in multiple sources. Obviously, we had a huge battle this budget year over basic education funding commission adoption, as well as PlanCon and kind of the facilities funding for traditional public schools moving forward. I'm very happy to report that we did get the Basic Education Funding Commission approved for this year, and hopefully that will continue moving forward. And we also got PlanCon funding and making sure school districts get reimbursed for what they're owed moving forward. But we also have, and General Assembly has moved charter reform legislation for the past numerous sessions, going back to when I started here, my freshman year, going on 8 years. And part of that is trying to find equity and fairness within reimbursements going back to charter schools. And I think there's work from both sides to make sure we have equitable funding. And really, it's the goal of the General Assembly not to necessarily destroy options or destroy public education. We should focus on, A, making sure we have robust options for students moving forward to make sure they get the best education in the mechanism they and their parents feel is the best for them moving forward. But also, we need to make sure, and the focus should be on failing school districts. This is 2016. We should not have failing schools, whether they're cyber charter, or your traditional public schools moving forward. And that's really, I think, the big battle, the civil rights battle of our times moving forward, is make sure we have success in education moving forward. I'm very happy to open up this press conference. PennCan and these organizations came out with a charter facility study calling on and highlighting some issues with charter schools and their facilities funding moving forward. I think it's an interesting piece as we move forward in discussing charter school reform. Hopeful that House Bill 530, charter reform legislation authored by Mike Reese, continues to move through the process, and we can get some of these issues between the traditional public schools and charters fixed to make sure we have robust choice and accountability and success in education, regardless of how parents and students get that education delivered to them. First up, I'd like to introduce Bob Fafich, with the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Coalition for Public Charter Schools. Bob, thanks so much.
Thank you. Good morning. He's a little taller than I am, so the mic's at my chest right now. Some of you may not know this, but this week is National Charter School Week. It's the national celebration of charter schools, and charter schools were started in Minnesota in 1992. Today, there are 43 states and the District of Columbia that have authorized charter schools. There are more than 6,800 schools serving 2.9 million students, with another 1 million students on waiting lists to get into those schools nationally. In Pennsylvania, the original law to start the brick and mortar charters was passed in 1997. And today there are 174 charter schools in Pennsylvania. 160 of them are brick and mortar, and 14 of them are cybers. Those schools are serving about 130,000 students with tens of thousands on waiting lists to get in, including a school in Philadelphia, which about 3 weeks ago had 8,000 applicants for 99 positions. So on a national basis, they're celebrating charter schools and the hope that they can provide for students like the students up here and hundreds of thousands in the state. But Pennsylvania isn't celebrating as much as a number of the other states, and there are several reasons for that. Yesterday, there was a rally in the rotunda of a group called the Campaign for Fair Education Funding. It's an unusual group that includes the teachers' unions, the school board associations, the faith-based organizations, children advocacy organizations, businesses, and our organization represents the charter voice in that group. You wouldn't think those people would work well together. We have two objectives. One is to get more funding for all the children in K-12 education in the state, and the second objective is to have it distributed more equitably. That second objective, there was a major step forward in that, and it was just mentioned, the passage of the Basic Education Funding Commission recommendation, which provided a formula for distribution of the new money that was in the budget, the $200 million in the 2015-16 budget. And the distribution is that on a much more equitable basis than it has been done historically in the state. It is in the fiscal budget, so it only applies to this year, but as was mentioned, we hope that it will be a permanent part of the budget moving forward. The second part is increased funding. The General Assembly added $200 million to basic education funding this year, which is a step in the right direction, but the group thinks there needs to be more, not only more funding, but more accountability for the $26 billion that is currently spent in this state on K-12 public education. But both the districts and the charter schools have been impacted by the budget impasse that took place on the 2015-16 budget. The districts had to borrow a little over $1 billion and are paying $400 million in interest fees on that money. The charter schools, much less, a little over $2 million. But a lot of the schools depleted a lot of their unreserved fund balances that they had in place. And they're in a much more precarious financial position than they were a year ago. So the budget impasse has something that affected both charters and district schools. But in addition, the charters have been impacted by two other things. One is an inequitable funding formula for how charter schools are paid. There is proposed in House Bill 530 a funding commission, just as there was for special education and for basic education funding, to look at charter funding. We are supportive of that, but it is currently inequitable. The most blatant inequity is the lack of facilities funding for charter schools, which you'll hear more about today. The other issue that charters face that the districts don't is a very unfavorable administration currently in place who is doing everything from our perspective to cripple school choice in Pennsylvania. So what the rest of today's conference is to talk about those other two issues, the actions that we think are trying to cripple charter schools in the state right now, and the funding for facilities for charter schools. So if I may introduce the CEO of City Charter High in Pittsburgh, Ron Sofo. Ron?
Thank you, Bob. Happy to be here this morning. My name is Ron Sofo, CEO, Principal of City Charter High School. We serve about 640 students, open enrollment high school in the city of Pittsburgh, urban youth. Our big concern is, let's just be fair. We're public schools too. So why do we have a governor that suggests that we can't have fund balances, and if we have any unreserved fund balances, they must go back to our local school districts? We would be out of operation. We would not expect that to happen or say that to your local neighborhood public school district, which I was a superintendent of for 10 years. Why say that to charters? What's the motive? We have a special education tiered funding formula. The law was passed and the suggestion was made that that was to be applied to the new money going into the budget a year ago. But for charters, no, it's all your special education money. Where's the fairness in that? All right? $8 million was supposed to come in ready-to-learn block grants to charter schools. The governor decided, oh, no, 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 no. We've got to make right what's happening over in your local neighborhood public school. They lost the reimbursement under a former administration of 30% of their costs, so we're going to send that $8 million to your local neighborhood public schools. We have public school students, too, who deserve an equitable, fair education. I wonder about the motives. If we're providing a quality option, and it should be a quality option, choice without quality is not choice. And I stand here as a CEO who was a superintendent of a public school district saying that all students need quality choices, and charters need to be part of that fabric. We are by law, and we should be treated as such. Another item that we find a little wondering is why, when there was in House Bill 530 a suggestion for a funding commission to take a real look at actual costs. What does it really cost to educate a kid, whether it's at City High, whether it's a charter school in Philadelphia, and base decisions upon funding of charter schools on reality? Nobody wants to look at reality. We want to go political dogma, which leaves kids last. So I won't say a whole lot more, but I question the motives, particularly, and I'll end with this. We've asked the Secretary of Education and the Governor to come see City High. We educate kids for $6,000 less than our authorizing school district. We do a great job. They've been in Western Pennsylvania anywhere from 5 to 8 times since the Governor and the Secretary has taken office. They don't come and visit. I want them to see the school in action, not a show. So at this point, I'd like to introduce a colleague who's working very hard in Philadelphia for excellence in quality charter school education, Amy Ruck-Kagan, who will have more to say, particularly on the Philadelphia situation. Thank you very much. Amy?
Thank you. Morning. As the Executive Director of Philadelphia Charters for Excellence, I wear many hats. Fighter for kids, quality proponent, an advocate, a convener, a presenter, but none come home with me as much as the role that this plays out in my neighborhood playground. I'll quickly set the scene for you. My 11-month-old, 10 to 15 other kids, anywhere from, birth, 5, 10, all running around, and a handful of desperate, eager, and anxious parents. All the parents want to know is, do they need to move out of Philadelphia before kindergarten hits? Philadelphia is home to some 200,000 students. By the district's own and most recent measure of success, 80% of their own traditional public schools fall into the bottom 2 performance tiers, watch or intervene, meaning that they're all struggling or failing to demonstrate academic success. 1/3 of those same students attend a public charter school. While admittedly not all of the Philadelphia charters are closing the achievement gap, many are already outperforming their district counterparts, and many more are on the trajectory to do so. Philadelphia families, mine included, are desperate for quality options now, and charter schools are poised and ready to respond to the 22,000 families stuck on wait lists looking for a school of their choice. We are the solution for the massive problems facing students here in Philadelphia and across the Commonwealth. Why, then, are children in charter schools treated as second-class citizens? Why don't charter school students have access to equitable resources, a fair funding formula, and, as we have heard today, equitable facilities funding? Time after time, when Harrisburg makes cuts to education, charter schools are the first to be slashed. We've heard examples today. It has been death by 1,000 cuts. Just 3 weeks ago in Philadelphia, charter schools received another budgetary cut, resulting in reduced payments for the remaining 2 months of the year. Our member schools are now scrambling to come up with anything from several $100,000 to several $1 million in savings. They're being told to do this after 8/10 of the school year is already over. Where is that money going to come from? And then facilities. Students attending public brick and mortar charter schools receive significantly less per pupil funding than their traditional district school counterparts. Pennsylvania charter school students receive 32% less than they would if they attended district schools. This inequity is forcing charter schools to divert these much-needed funds to cover the cost of building, leasing, renovating, and maintaining facilities. We are forcing our schools, remember, the schools that are number 1, desperate for, and number 2, serving 1/3 of the same students, all of those kids at my neighborhood park, all of these kids behind us, to take more money away from fulfilling the core mission of schools, teaching and learning. We're not asking for a handout. In fact, there are several non-monetary recommendations that could help fund the facility gap. For example, in Philadelphia, the school district has many empty or underutilized buildings, costing the district millions of dollars a year in deferred maintenance. The unused buildings could serve as incubators for innovative school ideas, or for those successful schools that are looking for a home that will enable them to continue focusing on the teaching and learning. This concept is not new. Several other cities and states across the country have implemented this co-location idea, and there's been great benefit for all of the students. Today, we're here to educate our state legislators on these inequalities. We call on the legislator to enact reforms that would make more facility funding options available to charter schools. And with that, I'm going to introduce Amy Hollister, CEO and founder of Northwood Charter School, PCE board member, and also founding member of one of our greatest charter schools in Philadelphia.
So, Amy, I'm not a speechwriter. I just tell you how I feel. So when I was listening to Amy speak and she talked about being at the playground and hearing, like, are we staying here? Are we moving? Like, that is a conversation I hear. But a lot of the kids at my school don't have the option to move out. They're Philadelphia born and raised. They're third-generation Philadelphians who that's not an option for. School choice was a godsend. I've been with my current school for 11 years. I was the founding principal. I'm the CEO currently. Prior to that, I was a teacher at another charter school. So I've been in this for a long time. I've been at a lot of meetings. I have never, ever felt the fear that I feel now for all of those children who don't have options. We are the solution for them. We are not a Taj Mahal. Sometimes people think, you have these facilities, they're over the top, you're misspending. We hear these things about charter schools. Come see me. I don't have a Taj Mahal. I have a clean building. I have a safe building. We scrounged up enough money to plant some trees. My parents fundraised for a playground. I have one facilities man. We're not living above our means. We've operated as a fair provider. We've been transparent. We have success. I am the model charter school. My kids belong there. I have 70% of my teachers have been with me for 11 years. I don't have Ajita standing up here today. I have Ajita because over the next month I have to lay off 9 of them. That's the first for me ever. I've never let anyone go besides for performance. That breaks my heart. It breaks my heart for my kids. It breaks my heart for the future of schools in Philadelphia. I just say to you now that talking to people, we've never felt the rock bottom feeling that we feel right now. We're scared. We need help. You cannot continue to take and take and take from us and not look at the inequity. We've operated for a long time with a lot less, but you can't have us operate in third world country conditions for these kids. It's just not going to happen. If I have a crack in my floor, I should be able to fix it. If I have a tree that dies out front, I should have the ability to replant a new tree. Every kid deserves to come to a building that's beautiful, that feels safe. So please, I just plead. I plead the case that there's so many faces, and they're not standing here with me right there. They're at school right now, and they're doing their thing. And they don't even know that this is all happening. And we protect them from that. But for the 9 people that I need to lay off, for the parents that I need to explain this to, and finally to my children, we can't break their hearts. So we need to support this. We need to recognize that buckets that were once taken need to be looked at, and we need fair funding. Thank you. You make me upset because I think about this stuff. So Rachel, I'm going to introduce you, and I'm so glad that organizations like PennCan exist because they are much smarter than I am at putting all of the official facts down on paper. So Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you. So the funding inequities that exist in Pennsylvania, as you've heard, stem largely from the fact that charter schools lack access to the types of facility funding options available to district schools. In a new report that PennCan issued, we found that Pennsylvania lags far behind other states when it comes to equitably funding charter school facilities. One of the main factors driving this funding inequity is the fact that local school districts are able to deduct all of their capital and debt service expenditures, about $1,500 per pupil on average, when calculating the per pupil allocation for charter schools. This might be fair if charters received additional funding from the state for facilities, but charter schools are not eligible to receive funding through programs like PlanCon, the program that helps school districts finance their school construction projects. In fact, there are no state programs that permit charters to access state funds for school construction. Although Pennsylvania does offer partial reimbursement to charter schools that lease their buildings, it's a paltry $160 per pupil for elementary school students and $270 for high school students. For a school like City Charter High School in Pittsburgh, this lease reimbursement only covers about 5% of their costs, forcing them to divert instructional dollars to cover their facilities. By comparison, Washington, D.C. offers $3,000 per pupil for facility costs, more than 10 times the maximum reimbursement for a Pennsylvania charter. Additionally, in other states, charters have the freedom to use this per pupil funding to purchase, construct, or renovate, or lease. But in Pennsylvania, they can only use these small amount of funds to lease. Another problem for Pennsylvania charter schools is that, unlike school districts, charter schools don't have municipal bonding authority, which means they have to borrow at much higher interest rates than district schools. By comparison, 9 other states provide credit enhancement programs that make loans more affordable for charters. Additionally, because charters only have 5-year terms, any loan or bond contingent on the charter school's long-term revenue is really risky for lenders and hence more expensive for charter schools. Compared to other states, Pennsylvania is getting this wrong. There are 10 other states that directly finance charter school facilities through grant programs like PlanCon, and 10 other states do so through loan programs. 8 states provide credit enhancement programs to make loans more affordable. 11 states, as Amy talked about, make district facilities available to charter schools, whether it's providing space and co-locating or offering charter schools the right of first refusal to lease or purchase unused facilities. Charter schools in other states also find relief in policies that allow long-term charter authorizations. Currently, none of these exist in Pennsylvania. So based on PennCan's thorough review of what other states are doing and doing right, we recommend several solutions for lawmakers to consider. Strengthen the inadequate per pupil funding for charter schools and not limit this per pupil funding to just lease reimbursements. Include charter schools in the Pennsylvania State Intercept program for school districts so that charter schools can attain more affordable facility loans. Create capital grant programs for charters or a revolving loan fund so they can access building funds. Provide charter schools access to unused district facilities. And finally, renew charters on terms for longer than 5 years to improve interest rates for charter schools. We hope that lawmakers will seriously consider these options when charter schools are forced to spend operational funding on school facilities, they have to divert funds away from the core mission of schools, which is teaching and learning. Thus, when charter schools, it's also ultimately the charter school students who suffer from these funding inequities. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate, again, everyone's leadership on this topic, and obviously try to make sure we have the robust school options for children moving forward and make sure they have the best education possible in a way and a mechanism that fits their needs moving forward. With that, open it up to any questions? All right, thank you all for coming here. Students, enjoy the rest of your day at the Capitol. And I know we talked about Taj Mahal's construction. There's probably not a bigger Taj Mahal than the state capitol sitting here in Pennsylvania. So just want to make that point. And enjoy the rest of your day here, and hope you learn a little bit about the legislative process. And thanks for joining us on stage today. Thank you very much.